So, how many of you are freshers? Okay. It shows, the students have more and more interest to the Center for Indian China Studies. Before they have, there are very few freshers to come. You all of you know that we have many centers, of course. This is the first based on China, on countries. So it's called the Center for Indian China Studies. And later we also have the Center for India, Australia Studies, and Israel Studies. There's the three centers focused on countries. The Center for Indian Studies was established in October 2014. So we have several key events like Indian China Love Talk, as you have seen. We have several coming. We also have an Indian China Forum, Indian China seminars on different topics. So we welcome all of you to City in Future. We also call our volunteers. We have a very nice volunteer, Ashwarya, from DSIA actually. So this year she has been sent to the Chinese Embassy in India for internship. So later we will share her report. We also have some students interning in China, in Beijing. Today actually this one very important talk is the first for the fall semester of 2019. We're so lucky to have Professor Richard Wu from Hong Kong University, University of Hong Kong. So he is very specialized on the legal education and ethics studies. Yeah. Actually, he recently got 5 major grants, right? Yeah. Focus on this, especially for the students' perception of the values, it's legal values, right? In mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Philippines, including also India. So he and his team, we have two colleagues here.
Jan and Natalie. Natalie is that right?
Jan and Natalie come here for the research. So of course, they also visit GGU several times for this research. This is just the initial step. So now I want all of you, join me to invite Professor Wu to talk about the meaningful topic. Myself also very curious about this, about the legal education and ethical training in the three, they call it Greater China, means including mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So let's have a big applause to
Okay, so thanks for coming, and today is my first lecture in India. So I feel very honored to be the speaker. And also we came here this week. Actually, we only arrived at 1 a.m. yesterday to come here for 5 days to do the research. So I hope all of you can, after listening to the presentation, will participate in our research. So we will stay until next Monday and go back to Hong Kong by flight at 11 p.m. next Monday. So hopefully we can have more interactions with you in the coming 5 days. And this is the research that form part of our ongoing study of the ethical values of law students in different Asian countries. So this is the research that I completed for the first project, which is a comparison of the ethical values of law students in Hong Kong, mainland China, and Taiwan. And for this research, we spent 1 year to collect data from 600 law students in mainland China, 300 from Taiwan, and 300 from Hong Kong. So add up, we have around 1,200 students participating in this research. And for today's presentation, I want to present on the findings. But before we present the findings, I just want to give you an overview of the differences of the legal education in the three Chinese societies. Because most of you should have heard about mainland China, which is the People's Republic of China, which is the largest country in this part of the world. But when we talk about Greater China, actually we also include Hong Kong and Taiwan. So these three societies have very different legal education systems, which I want to give you an overview. And to start off the presentation, probably just try to highlight why we want to do this research. Because in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China, all three places have similar problem of growing unethical problem of lawyers. So for example, in Hong Kong, just last year, we have one law graduate who forged a transcript and sentenced to 9 months imprisonment. So what happened to this student who got bad results in the exams, and she tried to change the results in the transcript in order to apply for a good job in Hong Kong. And eventually, she was discovered and sentenced to 9 months imprisonment. And in the case of Taiwan 4 years ago, just this year, another government prosecutor was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment for taking bribes. So similar problem of ethical issues. Likewise, in mainland China, they also have a wide range of ethical issues arising from the lawyers. This includes commission of criminal offences, conflicts of interest, unlawful fee charging, undue influence of court proceedings, and failure to comply with the judicial, administrative, and professional procedures. So in mainland China, the problem of legal ethics is also pervasive. And in this context, so we conduct this research to study legal professionalism as a development problem in this part of the world. And we try to construct a conceptual framework to understand how the career orientation and values of law students in these three systems affect the decision making in actual scenarios. So, so basically our assumption here is different lawyers trained under different legal systems will be shaped to adopt different values, and which will in turn influence the career orientations. And we try to summarize three major values of law students. And this was quite common in different parts of the world, like United States. So we have those lawyers who are driven by business values, some lawyers that are driven by professional values, and some lawyers who are driven by personal values. So these are the three major values that influence the lawyers, both in the studies and also the future job seeking decision-making process. And so we look at the literature in the existing studies. So for example, in the United States, in Chicago, Simmons and Rosenberg, who found the majority of Chicago lawyers actually chose law for pragmatic reasons. So they don't study law for higher goals. They just want to have more money, okay? However, there's some other lawyers who want to focus on some legal ideals and procedural justice and rule of law. So for example, those who want to become government lawyers fall into this category. But for some more ambitious lawyers, they don't just focus on the legal system, they actually want to change the society. And this is the study done by Granville with Harvard Law School. So in Harvard Law School, he completed study in 1992. Actually, most of the graduates of Harvard Law School, they want to change society and seek social justice instead of becoming lawyers making more money. So that was the three major career orientations. So this is the framework for our study. So we argue that for future lawyers, namely you are all future lawyers, and the legal education system have different emphasis and different dimensions. And this will in turn shape their values, which in turn will change the career orientations. So finally, some may go for pragmatic reasons, some may go for legal ideals, some for even higher ideals of changing society. So this is the conceptual framework of our research. So to give you the background of the three Chinese societies, we try to look at the three systems in five dimensions. The first is the role of the state. So in mainland China and Taiwan, the government play a much stronger role than the system in Hong Kong. So for example, in China, basically two major ministries, namely education and justice, which will regulate legal education. Similarly, in Taiwan, they have a Ministry of Education and also justice responsible for professional training, but on the top of that, they have an examination ministry which will govern the bar exam in Taiwan. So both Taiwan and China, they have the government ministries which will oversee the legal education. So you can see in the case of mainland China, we call it a state control model. So basically, the state have a heavy influence on legal education. In the case of Taiwan, it's a bit different. We call it a state coordinate model. Basically, it means after Taiwan changed to a democratic state and democratic society in 1987, after the lifting of the martial law, the state played a more passive role in legal education. So, for example, in 2005, Taiwan, they tried to reform legal education. However, it was strongly opposed by the law school there. As a result, 2 years later, the government abandoned the legal education reform. So, in contrast, Hong Kong is a very different. Basically, the government is pretty hands-on in legal education. So, in Hong Kong, the legal profession play a much more dominant role in legal education. So, compared with Taiwan and China, Hong Kong, I would call it a profession influence model instead of a state coordinated or state control model. Or I would call it a state enable model. So the second differences between the three systems is, in Hong Kong, the legal education just focused on training professional and technical lawyers. So in the past 2 decades, we have 2 major studies which try to focus to produce best lawyers who can cope with the globalized legal practice. In case you don't know, Hong Kong is now the 3rd largest center of legal profession in the world. So we have the largest number of foreign law firms, only next to New York and London. So we have the largest number of foreign lawyers in Asia. So I mentioned earlier, I call the role or model in Hong Kong is one of state enable. In contrast, in Taiwan, the law school, they focus more on training government officers. And this has a lot to do with the history. Because in Taiwan, the law school actually started from the Department of Government and not from law school in the early days. Actually, it was started by Japan in the colonial days. So the law school nowadays, they are now split, basically, whether they should train lawyers or they should train legal scholars or even cultivated men and women. And in reality, most law graduates in Taiwan, they aspire to become judges because judges in Taiwan are pretty high paid compared with lawyers. So in the case of Taiwan, even up to now, there was no consensus on the goal of legal education. So one half of the people in society think that they should focus on training lawyers, one half think that they should focus on training generalist talent. For those who don't know Taiwan well, actually all presidents in Taiwan except one came from law school. So in Taiwan, many law students, they want to become politicians like those in the United States. So I mentioned earlier, this is a state coordinate model of legal education. Now, in the case of China, compared with Hong Kong and Taiwan, the legal education is far more political. So in the old days, before the economic reform, basically the goal of legal education is to train people who are both read and expert. Means they are ideologically correct and also they are expert in legal knowledge. But with the change of focus on market reform since 1979, the new goal of legal education is to help market economy and the rule of law to develop in the country. So you can see in the case of China, the goal of legal education is far more diverse compared with Hong Kong and Taiwan. But one thing that differentiates China from Hong Kong and mainland Taiwan is Chinese lawyers need to operate in a much politicized environment unlike those in Hong Kong and Taiwan. So most of the lawyers, they may have the membership of the Chinese Communist Party, and also they need to support the party role in many situations. So I would say in the case of mainland China, the goal of legal education is to produce CCP, Chinese Communist Party political supportive legal work personnel. So a political dimension is emphasized in the goals of legal education. So the differences of the goals reflect in the career choices of the law student in these 3 places. In Hong Kong, most law students, they just want to make more money and also become technical lawyers. So in a way, it force them to focus more on legal professionalism, which will turn them into better technical lawyers. In the case of mainland China and Taiwan, they focus on nurturing generalists who join different careers like academia and civil servants. And actually, in the case of mainland China, in the past 2 decades, they focus more on judicial professionalism. Means they want to professionalize the judges in a way similar to developed countries. And in terms of the curriculum, the 3 places are also different. In the case of Hong Kong, it adopted a common law curriculum. So basically, all the common law subjects are taught in the LLB program. I just learned over lunch that you also have an LLB program and an LLB and BA program, which is similar to our curriculum in Hong Kong. In addition to LLB, we have the US-style JD curriculum, which is probably equivalent to your LLB curriculum here. So this is a pretty common law based curriculum. In the case of Taiwan, it's different because Taiwan was ruled by Japan for many years, and it adopts civil law curriculum, and the curriculum is similar to countries like France, Germany, Japan, and not United States and United Kingdom. So courses are mostly theoretical, and they don't cover any legal practice skills. And also, unlike Hong Kong, they don't have any course that teach legal ethics. So in Hong Kong, we have a mandatory course of legal ethics at the postgraduate level. In the case of China, similar to Taiwan, is a civil law and also a socialist country. So the courses taught in the mainland law school are mostly theoretical, and likewise, they don't have a mandatory course of legal ethics or professional responsibility. But in the case of China, one thing that differentiates the curriculum from the 2 other Chinese societies is they have a general course on ideological orientation. For example, principles of Marxist philosophy or principles of Marxist political economy. So the political dimension of the curriculum is reflected. But even in the case of China, starting 2 years ago, the government started to change. In the bar exam, they now have more focus on legal ethics. So as a result, I was invited to design a new course for Peking University last year to teach students on this core area. And so compare the 3 law curriculum, they are similar in the sense they don't have any legal ethics curriculum in the undergraduate or academic stage of legal education. And in Hong Kong, we have this course, but only at the professional stage and not academic stage. And in the case of China, only CUPL is the law school that teach legal ethics. For information, in China now they have 600 to 800 law schools, and only 1 law school that teach legal ethics as a mandatory course. And the 4th comparison is on the focus of law teaching. So basically, in the case of Hong Kong, it focuses on court cases and the statutes, similar to common law curriculum. But in the case of Taiwan and mainland China, they focus on just the statutes and no case law is taught in the case of these 2 societies. And the next comparison is the structure of legal education. So in the case of Hong Kong, we have 2 stages. So one stage is the academic stage. The other stage is what we call professional stage. And this is something pretty unique to Hong Kong. And I don't find any country or society elsewhere in Asia have this structure. So basically in Hong Kong, all law students, they need to undergo both the academic and professional stage before they can become lawyers. So that means in the case of Hong Kong, we don't have a bar exam like that existing in the 2 other societies. And because we have 2 stages, so legal professionalism is actually taught at the professional stage. And for this criteria, Hong Kong is different from mainland China and Taiwan. But unlike Hong Kong, both China and Taiwan, they have the bar exam, which set the entry barrier for those who want to become lawyers. And however, in both places, they don't have any course on legal ethics before they join the legal profession. So this set out the background of our research. Now I go to the research itself that we conducted 5 years ago. So basically, we completed, I mentioned earlier, 1,108 questionnaires in 3 Chinese societies. We went to a total 14 law schools in mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And we focus on 6 scenarios that examine law student choices in dilemmas and the relative importance of values. So this is the questionnaire that I invite you to join in our research. So if you're interested, please feel free to join our survey that we will start tomorrow. So for these 6 scenarios, 2 scenarios describe dilemmas between acting for the interest of the law firm and the interest of your friend. So which interest you find more important? Okay, I won't give you the fact pattern, otherwise you will lose interest when you do the personal survey. Okay, and the 3 and the 4 scenario present conflict between professional values and personal values. So which value are more important to you? Okay, and for the 5 and 6 scenario, they are dilemmas between pursuing public interest and pursuing financial profit for the law firm. Again, you need to choose which values or which interests are more important to you. So for this research, we try to test 3 hypotheses. The first hypothesis is the likelihood that future lawyers will act for profit is positively related to the perceived importance of business values. And this relationship is stronger in the state-enabled model of legal education than in the state-controlled or state-coordinated model. So our assumption is if you become lawyer is motivated by business values, then you are more likely to concern profit. So this is the first hypothesis. The second, and also in the first hypothesis, we test the assumption that this is stronger in the stable enabled model of legal education than in the stable control or state coordinated. Namely, we assume that in Hong Kong, because most people are driven by business values, so they should be more driven for profit. Okay. The second hypothesis here is future lawyers will pursue professional ideals is positive related to the perceived importance of professional values and negative related to relational values. That means if you are driven by professional values to become lawyers, then you are more intent to pursue professional ideals, like, for example, procedural justice or to act for the innocent people. And also, under the second hypothesis is this likelihood will be stronger if the goal of legal education is to train technical lawyers rather than judges and government officials. So our assumption here is if it is more professionally driven legal education, it should produce lawyers who are more focused on, who are more professional and technical in terms of their orientation. And the third hypothesis here is those who act for public interest is positive related to the perceived importance of personal values like personal integrity and civic duty, and negative related to business values. And this should be former if the legal education put more emphasis on legal education, in legal ethics, in the law curriculum. So the third hypothesis, basically, we try to test whether you have some certain personal values which will motivate people to act for public interest than others. And also we try to test whether those legal education systems which put more emphasis on legal ethics will produce lawyers who are more willing to act for public interest. So these are the 3 hypotheses that we try to test in the 3 societies. So these are the findings of the 3 societies in Greater China. Now, the first finding is the law students in all 3 societies prefer to act for cooperation, with those in Taipei and Beijing more likely to act for cooperation than the counterparts in Hong Kong. So this is something quite counter our intuition. So the findings suggest that actually the lawyers in Taipei and Beijing actually they are more willing to make more profit than Hong Kong. So this is something quite counterintuitive. I will provide some explanation later on. And then this is also a very interesting finding is law students in all three societies are unwilling to take on extra hours. So that means the new generation of lawyers in all three societies, they all focus on better work-life balance. Nobody want to work long hours, unlike the earlier generation of lawyers. So in the case of Taiwan, it's the least likely to take on extra working hours. So this reflects a manifest change in the values of the lawyers in future. And for the second hypothesis, we find that the law students in Hong Kong are most likely to act in line with professional values. So this is something consistent with the hypothesis. And then for the third one, we find that law students in Taipei were most likely to act for public interest, and the Beijing law students were equally willing to work for public interest. In contrast, law students in Hong Kong are most unwilling to work for public interest. So this is also counterintuitive because we feel that if you train in a system which focuses on technical lawyers, you should be more willing to act for public interest. So why? So the question why comes in. So these are the data. I will skip that for today's presentation. So we try to explain the results with some theories. So we say the likelihood that law students would act for corporation is possibly related to perception of importance of business efficacy and professional ambition. So when we look at the data, basically two values stand out. One is business efficacy, another is professional ambition. For those law students who are driven by these two values, they are more intent to make more profit for the corporations. However, if they have stronger values, personal values like friendship, loyalty, and friendship interest, they're less willing to pursue greater profit. So for this is explain the findings in scenario 1 and the relationship between business advocacy and the willingness to act for the law firm. However, for the two societies of Hong Kong and Beijing, in comparison, it's interesting to find that the likelihood to act for greater profit actually is stronger in Taipei and not in Hong Kong and Beijing. So hypothesis 1 is not supported. The second hypothesis is this law student in line with professional values will add more for professional ideals. So two values stand out here. One is professional integrity, the other is obedience to the law. So we have to explain this in more context. When we did this research in Hong Kong, what happened was we have this Occupy Central movement in those days. So these two values pretty stand out in the minds of the law student at that time. So the relationship between professional integrity is also coming out in the scenario that deals with the reporting to local law society in relation to a breach of the relatives. So when we look at the findings, you can see professional integrity, obedience to the law, and professional integrity are all important in shaping the professional ideals of the law students. And for the first scenario, we find that students who have stronger values in personal integrity and civic duty are more inclined to act for public interest. So these two values stand out in the research. And when we look at the actual scenario, namely scenario 6, the relationship between those willingness to report a breach of a duty of confidentiality actually are closely related to the values of personal integrity. So that means if you have strong value of personal integrity at extreme situations, you may go for public interest more than your personal interest or even professional interest. So that means your personal value comes much more in extreme situations. So the result then makes support to hypothesis 3. Now, what are the implications of a study for legal professionalism development in Greater China? So we say this provides original evidence that legal ethics education will enhance legal professionalism in different societies. And we also demonstrate the relationship between career orientations and values of lawyers, future lawyers. So that means if you are driven by money to join the legal profession, you are most likely to ask for more profit, but at the same time, you are more vulnerable to commit unethical behavior. So the values that you have in law school will affect your future career. And one thing that strikes us is in all three societies, all law students were pretty strong in the desire to act for the corporation. So this is something consistent with the research in the United States that increasingly most lawyers study law just because of money. So this is the finding. So we say the results suggest a convergence in the decline of legal professionalism and ethical standard in different Chinese societies. And this we explain by virtue of global capitalism, which bring in commercialization and market competition in the legal profession in different parts of the world, and Greater China is of no exception. So that means the legal profession is becoming more commercialized. As a result, people are more inclined to make money instead of standing by the professional ideals. And one thing that strikes us is the Beijing sample was most willing to act for cooperation compared with the two other societies. So this is pretty counterintuitive because originally when we designed the research, we feel that Hong Kong students should be more pragmatic and money-minded. And this financial orientation of future lawyers appear to be not dependent on the societies, one, where legal education is state-enabled, state-controlled, or state-coordinated. That means this impact of globalization is universal on the financial orientation. And also, our research suggests even law students in a socialist legal education system can be more motivated by business values. So which is something we found in the research. Now this is something we try to provide for the explanation is market economy and commercialization have created a new generation of Chinese lawyers who are more technically competent, but at the same time they are more individualistic and have a stronger desire for money. So this is what Professor William Alford of Harvard Law School called the paradox of legal professionalism in China. So while the lawyers getting more professional in terms of the legal knowledge and skills, they have less concern for traditional values of professionalism like access to justice. So in the old days when China don't have the professional lawyers, they have what they call rice bowls legal workers. So they are very unprofessional by current standard. However, they have much more values for wider access to justice. So this created a paradox that Professor Alford of Harvard School called, while on one hand you create a more professional body of lawyers, at the same time it undermines a deeper purpose of legal profession, namely to wider access to justice in the country. And the Hong Kong sample also showed that the lawyers are more willing to report breach of ethical behavior to local law society. So this probably explained by the longer tradition of legal professionalism in Hong Kong, because just like India, we were ruled by the British for 180 years. So we have a stronger tradition and history. So in terms of values of professional integrity and obedience to the law, they're far more entrenched in Hong Kong than the two other Chinese societies. And when we compare Taipei and Beijing, we also find some interesting differences here. Taipei sample was more willing than its Beijing counterpart to report the matter to law society when there's a breach of unethical behavior. And it is quite interesting because both systems are civil law systems. Both are not focusing on training technical lawyers. Why such a differences? So our explanation is provided by the historical development of Taiwan. So what happened in Taiwan was, in 1987, the society lifted the martial law and full democracy was introduced since that year. So as a result, both the numbers of social status of lawyers grew and the society moved from authoritarian rule to democratic governance since 1987, more than 30 32 years now. And as a result, legal professionalism grow much better in Taiwan than mainland China. And also Professor Rachel Stern of Berkeley Law School, who coined this concept called authoritarian professionalism. So basically what Rachel Stern suggests is, in the case of mainland China, it's a kind of state-promoted professionalism. It's not bottom-up, it's top-down, rule from the top. So it requires lawyers to share an ideological underpinning in observance with professional values. So that means on one hand, they need to acquire professional values, but at the same time, they need to observe the party directive at the same time. So it's difficult for such system lawyers to embrace professional values in the same manner as the counterparts in other common law and civil law countries. So to compare China and Taiwan, we will say rule of law in mainland China is a political project. It's not just a rule of law project itself. And when we look at the third hypothesis, we find that Hong Kong was more willing to break client confidentiality duty and to report a breach of abuse of child case by the client. So we argue that the value of personal integrity is very important to cultivate a courageous trust public interest. So that means it shows the importance of cultivating certain values in legal education in order to produce more public interest lawyers. So in that sense, it suggests those law school or legal education will put more emphasis on legal ethics, will produce more lawyers who are likely to pursue public interest in the future. So overall, we would say a common law system like Hong Kong put more emphasis on legal ethics than civil and social law country, which in turn promote legal professionalism. And in the case of Hong Kong, it started from this year. I started to teach a new course called Ethical Lawyering for Public Interest in my law school. So this represents a new development in Hong Kong. So in the academic stage, we start to introduce a course in legal ethics starting from this year. In the case of mainland China, also mentioned earlier, last year they also put more emphasis on the legal ethics in the bar exam. So the chairman Xi Jinping, the party leader, emphasized the future Chinese lawyers need to be both technically competent and ethically adequate. So that means the emphasis on legal ethics is prominent in the case of mainland China. In comparison, in Taiwan, up to now, legal ethics is still relatively underdeveloped. So to conclude, our study provides original insight into legal professionalism in different legal education systems in mainland China. And I think the findings should be also relevant not just to mainland China, Hong Kong and Taiwan, but also to other parts of the Asian countries. And this universal materialistic orientation of future lawyers point to the need of the erosion of legal professionalism by values of market economy that exists not only in the Greater China, but also exists in different parts of the world. And finally, we argue that legal profession should flourish more in system in common and civil law than in social law, because in the case of mainland China, they may impose political constraint on the full development of legal professionalism. And our finding also suggests the state influence in legal education in different societies. So we conceptualize basically the three models of legal education, not just in Greater China, but also in different parts of the world. One is what we call a state control, as represented by mainland China. What's moderate, I call state coordinated, represented by Taiwan. And finally, weak, I call state enabled, in the case of Hong Kong. And the last point about our research is we argue legal education cannot merely focus on nurturing technicians, but we need to produce lawyers who embrace such values of legal professionalism, in particular access to justice, because this is important not only to the legal profession, but also to the whole society as a whole. Okay, so that's all of my presentation, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
all these details. Yeah, so we welcome questions.
Okay, so you said that these law students in Hong Kong, you tend to decide to study law for professional ideal reasons, such as access to justice. So would you say that that has anything to do with their recent shifts to the recent calls for a more democratic form of government in Hong Kong?
I think our research was undertaken in 2014, so before the recent protests. But at that time, we have the Occupy Central movement, which probably something linked to the current protests taking place in Hong Kong. And I would say there may be some correlation, but that's not the focus of our original research. But one thing that pretty stand out from our research is when we conduct the research, the students keep on telling us that they're very, very conscious about the values of professional integrity. So this probably have something to do with the current protests taking place in Hong Kong. Thank you. Yes.
So by your this thing, I saw that people of Hong Kong are not motivated to make money at the expense of ethics, but of China and Taiwan are more inclined to make personal gains at the expense of ethics. Is it in any ways related to their personal economies and not just ethics?
Yes, it's possible because for this research we just try to narrow down our research focus on ethics. But you are right, there may be other factors that also shape the differences. Yes, agree. Yeah. Thank you.
What another student?
You used a term called authoritarian professionalism in terms of China. So, sir, if China is trying to introduce, say, more ethical upbringing into their laws in 2018, as you said, but don't you think that the foundational will be something like ideological underpinning will always go on a higher pedestal when it comes to ethics, which are especially a bit static and straight in law?
Yeah, I think that was the point made by Professor Rachel Stern of Berkeley Law School. So in a model of authoritarian professionalism, there's a limit that you can embrace legal professionalism, because up to a point that political power or influence will somehow circumvent the full development of professional values. Yes.
Would you say that promoting a certain kind of ideology, for example, Marxist, Leninist, creates a certain kind of bias as well when future lawyers try to pursue law in the country?
Certain bias. Now, actually, one scholar on China, an anthropologist, he used this very interesting concept called erosion of market erosion. So what she suggests was, before China introduced market reform in 1979, basically China was a very ideological communist country. So at that time, the state has a heavy influence on everything in daily life. Okay, but after China introduced market reform in 1979, the influence of the state started to wither. But as a result, the commercialization, globalization impact start to come in. And this gradually erode the values of not just lawyers, but actually the whole country. So as a result, after 3 to 4 decades of market erosion, what happened in China is these lawyers or the corporation are much more commercialized compared with the counterparts before 1979. Okay, so before 1979, basically they feel lawyers should only serve the state, but after 4 decades, now the new generation lawyer, they say the lawyer should only serve the market. So go from one extreme to the other extreme in 4 decades. So this is the theory of market erosion advocated by one scholar on anthropology. So I think this explanation is quite plausible. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So I'm not as trained in law, but I'm very curious about all these aspects. So one of the things I wanted to, if you can which is, in the context of when we use the word legal ethics, or, you like to put aside legal and just, talk about ethics. I want to wonder, how do you compare or contrast it with, say, the party ideology? Because, say, assuming, say, today, globally, in legal conduct, I think anti-corruption has become, in the democratic world, a big, almost an ethical matter, right? So, China under President Xi Jinping has also brought about more focus on anti-corruption, right? So, and it is, he said it is central to the party's ideology and maintenance, right? So, can we collapse then, party ideology and legal ethics, and into one, or do you see they are always distinct, but maybe they feed off each other?
Actually, what happened now in China is they advocate certain what they call socialist virtues. I think 14 of them. And if you look at those descriptions, some of them are actually consistent with traditional understanding of legal ethics, but of course, they are not overriding. So that means if you look at the list of 14 virtues, some of them may be similar, or possibly not identical to traditional understanding of legal ethics. But I think the overriding issue still is within a strong political control society, you always don't know what happens next. Okay, so legal ethics may grow because of the recent change in the bar exam in mainland China, but you can never know what happens, say, 5 years from now, if they have a change in party policy, how that change in party policy will change the development of legal ethics in the country. So I think this is, again, go back to Rachel Strand's argument. Our system of authoritarian professionalism somehow is different from traditional profession that we have in other societies. Yeah.
Can I follow up with a couple more?
Yeah. Sorry?
Can I have a couple of other questions, actually.
Yeah.
If others have, I know. Okay.
Yeah.
In the other parties, with regarding to education itself, societies like India, China, and all of them, are only now having, are able to provide greater access to higher education.
Yes.
So, in terms of if you count number of professional engineering colleges, medical colleges, and all of these, we see that they are rapidly increasing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Western world, they have already had a kind of almost like a saturation, and legal ethics or any other kinds of things, in the particular discipline, were well developed. So, but here, access to higher education is also tied to both, increasing your economic status, social status, like for example, in the past in India, it's been a big barrier, but I think now having a profession like engineering and medical, now legal education, can give you a chance at earning money. So maybe legal ethics is like, its time hasn't yet come.
Yes. I agree. There's a certain issue with the stage of development of the society. You're right. Yes.
And the smaller one is with regard to comparative to other fields, say like legal ethics. Doctors also have a whole kind of professional ethics. So
Yes.
Compare, or is there any literature
Yes.
on, say, changes in
Yeah.
medical education in China,
Yeah.
and in these areas?
I think basically my wife teaches journalism. So in journalism, they also have the issue of journalism ethics these days, like the fake news. So what happened, I observed in all disciplines is there's all have a growing emphasis on ethics. So for example, in medicine, medical ethics is a fast-growing issue. For example, infertility. So I have a high school classmate who's an expert in infertility in New York, and he told me a lot of ethical issues arising from that fast-growing area. So I think this is a universal, not just confined to law, but actually applied to many professions around the world. I can say medicine, journalism, social work. So all professions or occupations are having a common problem in ethics. So this is a fast-growing field, and that's why I chose this area for my research, because this is a very fast-growing but highly underdeveloped area for research.
So for the quantitative research, right?
Yes.
Especially small sampling.
Yes.
So there are usually lots of challenges about the solidarity or the soundness of the research. So in terms of this research, you didn't mention about sampling.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So how did you sample how did you collect the sampling? For example, if you only collect the middle class, similar level in their society, the students,
Yes.
and you need to control some factors,
Yes.
then maybe you can make it comparable.
Yes.
Otherwise, a student like in mainland, so almost the university law school is government funded, so
Yeah.
any background you can join.
Yeah.
So if a student from a very poor rural family and a student from upper middle class, their answer might be different.
Yes,
in terms
agree,
of,
agree,
profit.
agree.
So I just want to know how you sample, how to control the variables and
Yes.
to make this research sound.
So basically, there's a limit that we can do because in Germany and China, they have 800 law schools. So what we try to do is for this research, because we have the limited funding as well. So what we try to do is to focus on those major law schools in the three places. And even in the case of China, we can only cover Beijing and Shanghai, actually, because we don't have enough budget to cover other cities. But this research, we say, marks only the beginning of our research in this area. So hopefully in the future, what we try to do is we want to do more longitudinal study to see how it change with the passage of time of the values. And you're right, the sampling issue is one big issue. And this ties back to a limitation in our research because largely it depends on the cooperation of the students. So that's why sometimes there may be some bias in the sample. So those are more willing to do the research, come out to fill the questionnaire survey, they are already more ethical, okay? So there's inherent limitation in the sample. But I think somehow we try to say this is not a research that we try to point definitely to certain results, but rather to highlight the issues that we want to have more investigation in future. But I think one thing that is quite obvious from the research is legal ethics is increasingly a general issue that is not particularly confined to any society, but rather to any country. We cover nearly 10 Asian societies by now. I think so far the issue is pretty universal. Everywhere, when we talk to the students, we talk to the law professors, they all tell us that this is a growing issue in this country. So we went to Japan, South Korea, even Vietnam, everybody telling us the same issue, except the nature of the ethical behavior, unethical behavior is different. But the issue is similar. So we feel this is a field that we should work together to work with legal scholars in different parts of Asia, because for legal ethics, already very highly developed in the United States. Australia already highly developed, but in Asia, virtually, even in the whole of mainland China, I can only find one single legal scholar who focuses on legal ethics, my good friend, Professor Xi Junjian of CUPL. So this is a fast-growing area, but at the same time, very few people do research. So I hope by doing this kind of research, we can generate interest for future scholars to join the meaningful research in this area. And also, this is not just important for academics, but also important for the legal profession and the society. Because increasingly people, why so many lawyers are spending the time to make money, so few lawyers to spend time to create interest. Why so many lawyers are unhappy? So my good friend, Professor Lawrence Krieger of Florida Law School, he is the expert on well-being of lawyers. And one reason why so many lawyers are unhappy, because they want to make more money, but they cannot find meaning in the work. And that goes back to the values as well. So this kind of research is not confined to the issue of legal ethics, but also tie in with the fast-growing area of the well-being of lawyers in both Australia and the United States. So I went to Australia. Now in every law school in Australia, they have a well-being officer appointed, who is a full-time law professor. So this is another growing issue, and this is also an area that I'm moving into. Actually, probably you may not know, judicial depression is now becoming a common problem everywhere. So I was invited by my student in Hong Kong to do research on how this affects the work of the judges. So this also ties with well-being. So well-being also ties with values. So my research is not just confined to legal ethics, but also build a platform for the research on well-being of the legal profession as well.
Yeah, I also, one more thing you
Yes.
mentioned. So like the World Value Survey, right?
Mm.
So every 5 years, they have developed a very rigorous procedure like how to make the sampling, even though it's a small number of sampling, but all the countries apply the same standards.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it
yeah.
makes the comparison much
Yeah.
easier, right?
Yes, yes.
So I wonder whether in future, like your research, if build the foundation and then develop a more rigorous sampling methodology
Yes.
and to collect this data and build the database. So
Yes.
maybe if
I think actually a professor in Israel to try to do something to set a questionnaire to test the values across different places. But I think for my research, my purpose is not try to build a global scale of a database for research, but rather to create a awareness among the Asian countries of importance of legal ethics. So the purpose may be a bit different. And also I look at the survey instrument. The problem of creating a standardized questionnaire survey is somehow if the questionnaire is too standardized, it will become too abstract. Because if you try to standardize those values, somehow you try to define certain values in certain ways. And that can be dangerous because values themselves are culture specific. So for example, when we talk about honesty, honesty in India may mean different things from honesty in Hong Kong. So I have some reservation about that survey instrument. Yeah. So there's a limit to what we can do here. Yeah.
okay.
Okay?
So should we stop here or we have a final question?
Yes.
Huh? You have one more question?
Yes,
Okay.
on the methodology.
Mm.
Because you said, this research will be in progress.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone has been hi.
Okay.
It's okay? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.